Today, we are diving into the Book of Monotheism, a really fascinating text that makes a pretty radical claim. It argues that true faith isn't some destination you arrive at, but actually a razor-thin path. And for centuries, believers have been falling into two major traps on either side of this path. So let's try to walk this tightrope together and see what this unique perspective on belief is all about. Okay, so here's our game plan. First up, we're going to look at how the book totally redefines monotheism itself. Then, we'll dig into what it calls the two great mistakes that pull people off the true path. After looking at some real-world examples, we'll explore what the book says is the ultimate goal, finding that perfect balance of the middle path. All right out of the gate, the book asks us to make a really important mental split. It suggests we can't just talk about God as one single idea. No, we need to think of it in two layers. You've got the divine that we can kind of relate to and understand, and then there's the ultimate source, a reality so huge it's beyond anything our minds can possibly wrap around. So the very first step on this path is a concept called tawhid. The best way to think about it is like this. All those attributes we connect with God, mercy, power, wisdom, they aren't separate things. They're all perfectly united in a single, indivisible divine essence. And the book gives this unified concept a name, Allah, the focal point for all of creation. But here's the thing, Tawhid is just the starting point. The author says that even the name Allah is really just a signpost, pointing towards something way more profound. This next level is called Huwa, or He. Now, this isn't really a name, it's a concept for the ultimate reality, a truth so far beyond our words that, and this is the paradox, the only way you can truly know it is to completely accept that you can't know it. So, with that two-layered idea of the divine in our heads, the book presents our whole spiritual journey as this great struggle. Seriously, it's like walking a tightrope with a huge, dangerous fall on either side. And these two fundamental mistakes are called ifrat and tafrit. So let's really look at these two pitfalls. On one side, you've got excessiveness, or ifrat. This is the mistake of being way too rigid. You draw the line so tightly that you end up demoting God's prophets to basically glorified delivery men, and you strip them of their spiritual importance. Then on the other side, you've got negligence, or tafrit, and this is the exact opposite mistake, being so careless with the boundaries that you totally erase the line between the divine and the human, and you start treating messengers as if they are God themselves. Now, to see what this error of excessiveness looks like in the real world, the author doesn't just talk theory. He points to a very specific example, his theological critique of Wahhabism. This quote, wow, it really just cuts right to the heart of the argument. The author's claim is that in trying to create this pure form of monotheism by getting rid of any and all go-betweens, this approach ironically falls into what he considers the absolute gravest spiritual errors. Shirk, which means associating partners with God, and kufr, which means disbelief. So the bottom line of the critique is this. By reducing the prophet to just a messenger and completely denying the spiritual role of God's representatives, this view basically cancels out their intended purpose. From this perspective, it's not a purification of faith at all, it's a distortion. It's kind of like trying to get a message while throwing away the key that actually decodes it. Okay, so if that's the error of being too restrictive, what about the other extreme? Well, for the error of negligence, the author turns his attention to a totally different theological framework, the Christian doctrine of the Trinity and the Incarnation. The author's whole argument here is that if the absolute, unlimited divine takes on a physical body, well, that implies limits and needs and vulnerabilities. For him, this just flat out contradicts the very definition of a self-sufficient God. It violates that core principle of absolute divinity. So the critique really boils down to this. By creating a plurality within the one Godhead, and by equating a created being like Jesus with the uncreated divine, this view, according to the author, commits the error of negligence. It just blurs that fundamental, bright line that has to exist between the creator and the creation. So we've seen the two giant chasms on either side of the path, the pitfall of excessiveness and the pitfall of negligence. And now that he's defined the dangers, the author finally charts a course right between them, what he calls the middle path to a truly authentic monotheism. And this, right here, is where the whole perspective completely shifts. The author argues that we've been asking the wrong question all along. See, true monotheism isn't about trying to define God, which is impossible anyway. It's about something called tasbih, or glorification. And you achieve that not through knowledge, but by humbly, deeply recognizing your own inability to ever fully know that ultimate reality.
The book lays this out as a three-stage journey. You start by knowing God through his reflections here on earth, the prophets, who are called the face of Allah. By knowing them, you start to know the divine that they represent. But here's the final amazing twist. This journey doesn't end in certainty. It ends at the highest possible form of knowing, which is the deep, profound realization that the ultimate truth, Huwa, is and always will be completely beyond your grasp.
You know, this powerful metaphor from the text really just says it all. Monotheism is described as a path sharper than the sword and thinner than a hair. This isn't some broad, easy highway of belief we're talking about. Nope. It's a path of unbelievable precision, and it requires constant awareness just to stay balanced and not fall into those errors on either side. So, in the end, the book leaves us with a really challenging thought. It redefines monotheism not as a set of answers you find, but as this precarious, razor-thin path you have to walk. And that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the truest path is thinner than a hair, what does that say about the nature of faith itself? Maybe it's less about arriving at some final destination, and more about the constant, conscious effort of the journey itself.